Warning, the following radio show was rated a D- by those that are complacent, apathetic, and atheist. Broadcasting live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, every Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. Central. This is the Solid Reasons Morning Show, tackling the tough issues head on, telling you exactly what you need, exactly when you want it, all from a Christian worldview. This is the Solid Reasons Morning Show.
Well, good morning. It's Tuesday, May 5th. Bright and early. Thanks so much for joining us. It's Cinco de Mayo, so happy May 5th. It's pretty... I feel like I need more music. Just the whole time. I'll keep talking, and there'll be a bunch of really great music behind. I say that tongue-in-cheek. I'm not a huge fan of the intro music, but, you know, that's all right. It does the job. Well, anyway, good morning. On today's show, we're going to talk a lot about atheism. So if you don't want to listen to that, turn it off now. Some of the interesting news articles coming out over the last week in Georgia. There's a group of atheists, you know them well, right here in Wisconsin. They're asking for an investigation into a Christian teacher that is addressing or had addressed a debate class at a high school in LaGrange, Georgia. Talk a little bit about that. Later in the show, we'll actually talk a little bit about that and also the intelligent design movement with Jonathan McLatchie. He's been on the show before. He's a PhD student in the area of cell biology, so really smart guy. And so, you know, there's that. Other news that I think definitely needs covering, and that is here in Wisconsin. Just recently, here in Wisconsin, it's the capital of the city. The Freedom from Religion Foundation somehow has gained some sort of footing at the city level. Doesn't quite make much sense. But this particular bill that has passed is a anti-discrimination bill against non-religion. We've talked about this before, the concept that somehow atheists don't have beliefs. It doesn't actually make any sense whatsoever. If you were to have a conversation with an atheist, you would say what? That you don't actually have any beliefs, that you aren't actually going to have a conversation with me because you don't go pro or con on an issue. And that's essentially what's happening here. So we'll cover that as well. Let's take a quick break when I'm ready. It's coffee break time.
Haven't had your coffee yet? Us either. That's why we're taking this quick 20-second break so we can slam a cup real quick. Don't worry, the Solid Reasons Morning Show will be back in just a few more seconds. Much better. And we're back.
Another article that I'd like to cover this morning. I think we may have actually talked about this before, but this is another situation in Georgia. Georgia's just getting all the news. Principal saying that he was fired after praying at a Fellowship of Christian Athletes meeting in Manchester, Georgia. High school principal, Georgia, speaking out after he says that he was fired at a voluntary Fellowship for Christian Athletes meeting last month. He was the high school principal for 3 years. 2 days after leading a prayer at the group, he was told that his contract is not being renewed. To a local television station, he said, "We're all kind of baffled by the decision. Superintendent has heard me pray at meetings before. She's been beside me when I cite scripture at graduation. and her own board meetings begin with prayer. However, as a non-tenured employee, I'm not entitled to an explanation or a hearing. One student that was a part of the group told reporters that other staff members have helped lead meetings in the past. He did a sermon that was nice of him, but I didn't think he would be fired for it if that was the reason he was let go. It's breaking our hearts because it's not supposed to be like this, said one of the parents. Of course, no specific update as to if that is in fact the reason that he was let go or not. It does seem interesting, though, when you read reports like this. You know, a principal for 3+ years, no issues, no concerns. And then all of a sudden this particular principal, prays at a voluntary meeting of like-minded Christian athletes. It just seems somewhat ironic that within just a couple of days, you're going to be let go as a result. I mean, we are in, of course, the day and age where we have tolerance, and we are promoting this belief that we should all be able to get along. And however, the situation, the tide that is upon us now, is a situation where tolerance really doesn't mean tolerance. We're supposed to somehow accept all beliefs, even if they contradict one another. And if your beliefs somehow contradict another individual's beliefs, then your beliefs probably need to be set aside, because your beliefs are probably bigoted and filled with hate. And unfortunately, that's the situation that we live in. That's where we're at now. That is America in the 21st century. Another article that is very similar to that, and that is the numerous atheist groups. One of those being the infamous Freedom from Religion Foundation. That's right here in Madison, Wisconsin. That's with Dan Barker. I continually scratch my head at this organization. They're the guys that I swear to you, if this doesn't actually exist, then I don't actually know what they do there. But I think the Freedom from Religion Foundation has a letter writing department. I bet they have 50 people that literally are just writing letters and sending out letters. If for any of you that know of all the different situations where Freedom from Religion Foundation is in the news, it always, always, always starts with a letter. An angry letter from Freedom from Religion Foundation. This goes back a few months back. There was a restaurant in Georgia where Freedom from Religion Foundation heard that this restaurant gives discounts to anybody that prays prior to their meal. And so they said, wait a minute, you're giving a discount. It's an unfair advantage to anyone that has a religion because we don't have a religion. So therefore, we don't get the discount. That's discrimination. And if that's discrimination, then of course, all religions don't actually have any sort of ground to stand on, especially not in that situation. But the atheist somehow has some sort of ground to stand on because they don't have a religion. They don't actually have any beliefs. And so it's interesting, of course, coming out of the Georgia article right here in Wisconsin, that Madison, Wisconsin has now actually passed a law that protects the atheists, because we can't have discrimination against non-belief. We can't have discrimination against non-religion. And yet I find it interesting that they have somehow painted this picture that atheism doesn't have any beliefs, that atheism is like an individual is somehow a blob with no beliefs whatsoever. It's just a blob of matter. And they somehow don't actually believe anything. If you've ever been to one of my family functions, which I doubt that you have, there might be a few family members that are blobs that actually don't have many beliefs. I've been in conversations with them. But I don't think that actually accounts for what they're trying to drive here in Madison, Wisconsin. I don't think that it actually makes much sense to try and say that anybody doesn't have beliefs. Because even in the case of atheism, an individual does in fact have beliefs. To try and say otherwise actually doesn't actually make any sense. The situation there is, and I don't actually think that the law was meant for any sort of purpose other than driving some sort of point for the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Of course, headquartered in Madison, Wisconsin. I think that it is simply a situation where the narrative that Freedom from Religion Foundation has been trying to push for years now is, we don't have any beliefs. We have a non-religion. We don't actually subscribe to anything. Well, I don't think that that's true. I think that Dan Barker has many, many, many beliefs. And I think many of them, a very good majority of them, are wrong. We're going to take a quick break.
I don't know about you, but I'm thinking when the show is over, I'm going to chow down on some bacon, eggs, hash browns, and pancakes. By the way, you do realize that the morning show is not all we do, right? We also have a full blog, yearly conferences, regional workshops, free PowerPoint slides, free handouts, 3 yearly youth camps, debates, and many other resources. Check out all the details at www.solidreasons.org. And you thought we actually had time to eat some breakfast? Right. All joking aside, we're back.
And we're back. We're joined with Jonathan McLatchie for this last segment in the show. Wanted to bring him on because I think that to really talk about the divide in our culture as it relates to this intelligent design, understanding God, what we as Christians have to deal with as it relates to the other side of the argument. And you look at laws where it comes to this law in Madison, Wisconsin. You look at this particular situation in Madison, where you've got a situation where specific people are driving this narrative for Freedom from Religion Foundation. And essentially, I think that's what is actually taking place. We as Christians, I think, need to have a response. That, in addition to, of course, many years ago, the film Expelled came out, and that was the entire point that at the Christian University, numerous individuals that had beliefs that were driven towards intelligent design and not Darwinian evolution, in fact, were let go as a result of their beliefs. So, Jonathan McLatchie's been on the show before, PhD student in the area of cell biology. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show again.
I'm interested to know kind of what your thoughts are, especially as it relates to all these different stories that are coming out. You've got Madison, Wisconsin, right here in the state of Wisconsin, where I'm at. You've got a situation where you've got lawmakers passing laws for atheists, saying that atheists need to be protected from their non-belief and from their non-religion. You've got Christian debaters, in addition to principals that are fired for praying and having Christian beliefs. So I'm kind of curious, what are your thoughts, and what do you think that the Christian response should be in these types of situations?
Well, the Freedom from Religion Foundation basically promotes itself as an organization that is devoted to the preservation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which is basically saying that there's a separation between church and state. And in the case of this situation at this high school, Eric Hovind is a well-known proponent of biblical creationism, and it came to light that he had taken, that he had taught on critical thinking at this school, and the Freedom from Religion Foundation has basically said, we think that he's probably promoting religion, and so this goes against the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, and so he's doing something that's in violation of the law, and he must be stopped. And sure, that's the case. I mean, the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment doesn't allow one to publicly promote preferentially one particular religious view in a state-funded school. Now, as to whether he was doing that or not, it's not clear. I mean, Eric Hovind himself says that he was teaching students merely about critical thinking, and actually didn't bring up the whole topic of religion or creation or evolution or any of that kind of thing. So I guess an investigation has been launched, but it's not clear yet what the outcome of that investigation will be. Now, I'm personally of the persuasion that the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment is often misused and abused. Intelligent design, for example, is often branded as religion or creationism, when in fact intelligent design is quite different from that, and is in fact scientific theory. And many scientific theories have theological or larger metaphysical implications beyond merely the scientific enterprise. And so, the Big Bang cosmology, for example, was opposed for decades because of its profound metaphysical implications. It points towards, suggests that the universe began to exist at a point in the finite past, and so it suggests that the universe has some transcendent cause for its existence that goes beyond itself, and it aligns very well with a sort of a creation model where the universe began to exist and was brought into being by a transcendent creator or God. And intelligent design likewise has metaphysical implications, which I think are theistically friendly. Evolution itself, Darwinian evolution, also has metaphysical implications. I think that Richard Dawkins has gone on record as saying that that Darwin made it possible to be an intellectual fulfilled atheist, right? Because it actually allows you purportedly to explain the complexity and diversity of life without recourse to a designer. And so its key selling point is that it serves as a designer substitute. And so scientific theories often have metaphysical implications, but that doesn't necessarily make them the same thing as religion. But I think in this case, Eric Hovind claims at least that he was merely teaching critical thinking, and there's nothing illegal about that at all.
It's interesting because I think that the Freedom from Religion Foundation has really touted themselves as an organization that is free thinking, and they try and make this point. If you've ever seen any of Dan Barker's debates over the years, and you've ever read his book, or you've ever actually read any of the articles where Freedom from Religion Foundation is mentioned, one of the things that he and the organization promote is this idea that they don't have a religion, that they don't actually have any beliefs, that in fact atheism is the lack of belief when it comes to things of religion. And so, as it relates to this article here in Madison, Wisconsin, they're trying to protect, have a non-discrimination law. In fact, the non-discrimination law, or the anti-discrimination law, was already on the books in Madison, and they added to it the language that would also protect the non-religion, discrimination against non-religion and non-belief. Now, I'm curious what your thoughts are, because can an individual actually not have beliefs? I mean, is there somehow a belief neutrality, if you will? Because that to me doesn't make much sense.
Well, I mean, what they would say is that atheism itself is not it's not in itself an alternative paradigm. Atheism is just simply a failure to assent to the proposition of God. So they would argue that atheism is not it's just one ingredient in a worldview rather than the whole worldview. And so materialism would be a positive claim, the claim that there's nothing beyond the material realm. Whereas atheism is just simply, and the view purported by the Freedom from Religion Foundation, among others, the belief or the lack of belief that God exists. And so they would argue, I think, that one shouldn't. It would also be in equal violation of the Establishment Clause for one to promote non-belief in God, as well as to promote belief in God. But sure, everyone has beliefs, and I think everyone has beliefs, and everyone has a worldview, whether they recognize that worldview or are aware of that worldview or not.
Sure. Well, and I think it's interesting too, because Dan Barker on stage in any one debate will stand there, I suppose, but he'll numerous times espouse his beliefs as it relates to Christianity and the existence of Jesus and the resurrection and biblical reliability and so many things. He has all these different beliefs on all these different things, and yet,
right. But he would argue though that these go beyond the minimal claim of atheism, or he would argue that atheism is simply a lack of belief in God, and so these things about the historical credibility of the Bible and so forth, or the historicity of Jesus, are simply add-ons to that. So it's not part of his atheism. Just like I'm an intelligent design proponent, and I also happen to be a Christian, but Christianity is not the same thing as intelligent design. It's an add-on to it.
Gotcha. Now, moving into the discussion on intelligent design, I had mentioned the film Expelled moments ago. Do you think that there's still, I guess, a bit of a war, if you will, between proponents of Darwinian evolution versus proponents of intelligent design at the university level, the collegiate level, and in academia as a whole? I mean, it seems to me that, you see a lot of stories as it relates to individuals that are not necessarily being fired or let go, as we have seen. And maybe I'm not seeing those stories, but it seems that they're still kind of at odds with one another, and that the scientific community has not really fully grasped and fully accepted the theories of intelligent design.
Oh, there most certainly is currently still an intimidation culture against scientific critics of Darwinism, not just intelligent design proponents, but also people who venture to put their head above the parapet and say, I don't buy this neo-Darwinian synthesis, and I think that we need to search for some alternatives, even if those alternatives are unpopular and seen as being radical. And intelligent design, I think intelligent design proponents are often intimidated, and that is one reason why there are many intelligent design scientists who are not public about their intelligent design affiliations, because they fear that they would lose their jobs. We have the Discovery Institute has a scientific descent from Darwinism list, which lists, I think it's 800 scientists from academic institutions all over the world, all of whom have PhDs in a scientific field. And there are many others who say that they would put their name to the list if it wasn't for the fact that their jobs would be put at risk and so forth. So, Expelled documented many of these cases, and Richard Sternberg and others, but there've been many cases since that incident. David Coppedge, one example, and many others. So, yeah, I certainly think there's still an intimidation culture.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting too that intelligent design has not really gotten the legs that maybe a lot of us would hope that it would. I mean, of course, Illustra Media putting out many films regarding that particular topic. I think that they do a very fine job of that. Many other scientists out there that are purporting that as well, and I think that it's got a lot of room to grow. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll chat a little bit more with Jonathan McLatchie. We'll be right back.
The Solid Reasons Morning Show will be back in just a moment so that I can tell you about our cool social media pages. No, seriously, they are pretty cool. Okay, well, they're not that cool, but if you're a Facebook or Twitter junkie, check us out at facebook.com/solidreasons and twitter.com/solidreasons. Are you still there? The Solid Reasons Morning Show will be back in 3, 2, 1.
And we're back. So let's jump back to the article where Eric Hovind from Creation Today from out of Florida, I believe, was up in the Georgia area teaching a class on critical thinking. Now, I've got my thoughts on this. I'm a proponent of young Earth creationism, as it's said, and yet I'm not the biggest fan of some young Earth creationists, if you will, because I think that sometimes their approach seems to do more damage than good. And I'm not going to throw names out there or anything like that, but I'll let it be known that I think that we as apologists, we as especially within the creation movement, I think that we can do a better job. 1 Peter 3:15, of course, with honor and respect. And I think that at many times we don't do that last part. And I think that that's a talking point that needs to be shared and needs to be actually bought. And I think that too many times we just don't do it. Now, when we come to the story in Georgia, we have a situation where we have a public school, and somehow a public school is bringing in Eric Hovind. I mean, the thing that doesn't make sense to me here, Jonathan, is that we have clearly an individual that is a proponent of young Earth creationism, a proponent of Christianity. Of all things, why would you bring him in to be able to teach on critical thinking?
Yeah, I think that was what raised the red flags with the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Eric Hovind is known to be a public proponent and defender of young Earth creationism, and so they, I guess, just didn't buy that he was simply there to be teaching critical thinking, and so they launched this investigation. The investigation, I haven't seen a conclusion from that, so I don't know whether a conclusion has been come to or not. But I mean, I think that it's the burden of proof is on the Freedom from Religion Foundation to demonstrate that he is in violation of the law by showing that he is promoting preferentially his religious beliefs. And
it seems silly. I mean, when it comes down to the argument, it seems that Eric Hovind did not actually teach creationism at the school. He didn't actually mention religion. He didn't actually mention God. And so I guess that's all fine and good. And so the investigation should, in fact, come back as null, that they're not actually going to find anything, which is great. But it just seems odd to me that as a debate class or forensics class at a public institution, why anybody would actually bring. I mean, it's like bringing in Norman Geisler to teach on critical thinking at a public school. If I'm going to approach one of the high schools here and say, hey, we should really bring in Norman Geisler to be able to teach on critical thinking, or we should bring in William Lane Craig, and I think that's fine. And I think it's not to say that a Norman Geisler or William Lane Craig or an Alvin Planiga doesn't have something to say on the matter. It just seems kind of odd that that's the caliber of individual or the person that you're going to bring in for that particular purpose. And in fact, I may even argue that a William Lane Craig or Norman Geisler might actually be less controversial than bringing in an Eric Hovind for that purpose.
Right, but he'd probably be saying the same thing if it was an atheist.
Sure.
Teaching critical thinking.
It just seems silly. As it relates to this particular article, I think the jury's still out. I don't think that the public school necessarily did anything wrong. per se. I don't think that Eric necessarily taught anything that was against First Amendment, and I don't think that the Freedom from Religion Foundation actually has any sort of claims. And I think that the investigation is going to come back as null and void. However, I just find it somewhat odd that you would invite someone like Eric Hovind to come in and teach on critical thinking. I mean, it just seems a little out there. But, it is what it is. That's all the time that we have for today's show. Thanks so much for joining us. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us again. Going to definitely have you on to talk more about intelligent design and just things that are going on in the news as weeks go on. That's all the time we have for today. We'll see you tomorrow.
That's all the time we have for today's show. But don't worry, you can get much more amazing Solid Reasons content at our website, www.solidreasons.org. Plus, the conversation is only just beginning on social media. Do you want to help keep the ministry of Solid Reasons going strong? Help us out by partnering with us today. Pledges start at just $10 a month, and we'll send you some pretty cool stuff like t-shirts, free conference tickets, books, DVDs, and more. For more information, go to solidreasons.org/donate.